I can't remember if it was the last video or the video before, but a subscriber, Pavel Wolosh, and I hope I'm saying your name right, asked about the need for this 22 microfarad electrolytic capacitor here. It's been a while since I've worked on any amps or done any building. It took me a while to get my head around it and remember what I know. This is a negative feedback loop. What it's doing is it's taking output from one part of the circuit and it's re-inputting it back to an earlier part of the circuit. It's a negative loop because what we're taking here is inverse to what is coming out on the plate up here. I had been looking at this as a positive feedback loop where you feed a wave of the same phase back into an earlier part of the circuit and they add and you get positive feedback, or feedback is like standing in front of an amp with your guitar and it starts to feed back. It's an additive thing and it runs away on you, and it's not very common to use positive feedback in an amplifier. Negative feedback is used all the time. What we're doing is we're taking the output from V1B here and it goes on to the tone stack, but before it does that, we're sampling some of that output signal back down here through the drive control, a 1 meg pot and a 10K resistor, and then through this 22 microfarad electrolytic capacitor. And you note that the positive side is over here, not here. There are many things that capacitors are used for in a circuit. A capacitor will allow AC to flow through like it's not there, but DC cannot go through at all, direct current. If you look at this, what we have when we put a guitar signal in, we have an AC signal that we're trying to amplify and take all the way through to the output, the speaker, or the balanced output in this case, or whatever. To make the tubes operate, we need DC voltage, at DC on the plates, DC at the cathode, etc. And we do not want to pass any of that DC through to the next stage. We'll get scratchy pots, we'll get hum, we'll get all kinds of undesired results. So we put in what we call a coupling capacitor between the output of one stage to the input of another stage that blocks that DC but allows the AC signal, which we want, to pass through. What Pavel was asking was, what was the need for this 22 microfarad capacitor here? Again, I, for some reason, was looking at this as if it was positive feedback. I was in my head about it. It's not a positive feedback circuit. It's a negative feedback circuit. Once I realized that, the rest of this made a lot of sense to me. So the need for this capacitor here is that we've already blocked the DC coming out of this out of the plate here, or we're taking the output from V2 or from V1B, and we're feeding our negative feedback back through here. And when you look at it like that, well, there should be no need to block DC, but we have a positive DC charge at the top of this cathode resistor here as well. So we need to block that DC from going back through the negative feedback loop, and in particular through this drive circuit. It makes a scratchy sound. When you have DC on a pot, sometimes if you have dirty pots in an amp, you think they're dirty, you turn them and they're crackle and make noise, and you clean them with spray cleaner and they still crackle and make noise. It's a pretty good indication that you've got a failed or failing a coupling capacitor from the previous output stage. And that's exactly what would happen here. Because there's a positive charge at the top of the cathode resistor here, even though it's not much, if we didn't have this capacitor here, that DC would be traveling back through this way. It would go through this pot, we'd get crackling, and that just wouldn't be desirable. So this capacitor is here to block the DC from the cathode from going back through. The thing that kind of threw me on it was, why did we need such a big one, 22 microfarad, and it's pretty high voltage cap too. This preamp is not my design. It's a design that I've modified based on a circuit I got from Kevin O'Connor at London Power quite a few years ago. Actually, he clarified it was 2007 that I got it from him. I kind of wanted to just make sure I had all of this understanding right. So I emailed Kevin and said, you know, is my perception of this right? The reason I think that this capacitor is so large is the larger capacitor will allow more of the frequency range through. We want as full frequency coming through here as possible. If this were a much smaller capacitor, it would not allow much of the bass back through here, and we would not have so much of the effect of the negative feedback on the bass frequencies, and in particular, that's where we want it. So I've talked about this being a negative feedback loop. I'm not really going to get too much into negative feedback, but what negative feedback does, let's say we have an AC wave going in, and it's rising first, and then it goes through negative, and then back up to zero and rises again. As that goes positive here, at the plate, the output signal will be amplified, but it also will be inverse. It will go negative. So as the wave is rising on the input, it's falling or going negative on the output. And then we go through to the next stage, to V1B. Now we have a signal that's going negative first at the output. It's going to go positive and then negative. So we have an output signal here that is out of phase of the input signal, which is out of phase with its input signal. Now we're taking some of this and we're putting it back in here. Now I said this is positive going, we'll call it, coming out of here. So here we have a wave that's going positive, up, and then negative. The input is going positive, up, and then negative. But the output is going negative and then positive. So we are putting the output signal here in inverse to the output signal that is coming out of the plate. So what's happening is as the plate's going down here, this is going up here, the negative feedback, it's reducing the overall output, but it's giving us more headroom, more clean headroom. It won't distort as quickly, it won't distort as easily, and it won't go into distortion too abruptly. Without that negative feedback there, the transition from clean to distortion is a lot more abrupt. With negative feedback, clean to distortion is a lot smoother and more usable if you're going to even distort your bass. The other effect of negative feedback is that it evens out the frequency response. Any sort of spikes are mitigated by the corresponding inverse version of that spike coming through the negative feedback, if that makes sense. So it makes the overall frequency response much more level, more full frequency, and it does a lot to really make the sound a lot more hi-fi. And we kind of want that for bass. We want a full frequency response, a very even response, and nice and clean with lots of headroom. So this negative feedback loop is helping us to achieve that. There are lots of videos out there that describe this. I will down the road do some videos, or I'm planning on doing some videos to sort of go over things like this and explain them better. But you can search out other people right now on YouTube that have videos about this. Again, Uncle Doug has a couple of pretty good ones. So check those out. But that's the sort of nutshell description of this circuit. It's a negative feedback loop. We're putting some of the output signal back in at the front to reduce the gain, give us more clean headroom, and a more even frequency response. This capacitor here is large in terms of capacitance to allow all frequencies through, and it's blocking DC from the cathode, the top of the cathode resistor, from going back through this circuit across that pot, which would make it scratchy sounding. It also would throw off the response of the next stage. Well, the battery just went dead in my camera while I was filming that last part, so Hopefully I got everything I was saying, but if I didn't, I didn't. I will make some edits and make it work the way it is. But basically, that's a nutshell explanation of what's going on with that negative feedback part of the circuit for the preamp, going from the output of V1B back to the cathode of V1A. So as I was filming this, actually when I took a break to change the battery, I just took a look at my YouTube channel and I saw that I'd had a comment on the video I've been talking about, and it was from at Bear Bulldog, Thomas Nicolason. I hope I've got your name right. And he said the same thing. C3 blocks the DC from going back to that pot. And he said he wasn't that sure about what the rest of that circuit did. So hopefully my explanation of the negative feedback made sense. Most people who build tube amps are familiar with negative feedback. It's pretty common to take some negative feedback from the speaker output and go back to before the phase inverter of a power amplifier section of an amplifier. You'll see that in virtually all Marshalls and Fenders. You don't have to have negative feedback either. It changes the way the amp responds, sounds, and feels, and can be very usable. And more negative feedback can have some positive effects as well. Most people are used to seeing that, though. That is a global feedback loop, and it's very common. This feedback loop, you don't really see feedback utilized in the way it is in this preamp, but it's done to give us, again, as I said, more clean headroom and to balance out the frequency response of the circuit, of the preamp. So in the last video, I think I said I had ordered the transformer, which you have seen now already, and a chassis and a few other minor things I needed for this build, and I've received those. So I just thought I would go over that a bit, because now I have a better idea of the plan for how things are going to fit in the chassis. I still have not 100% decided on the cabinet. I'm getting close to that, but I don't need to do that for a while yet. So here is the chassis. It's a Hammond chassis, and I have the bottom plate, obviously. We don't need that right now, so I'll put it up here. This is the chassis that we will be using for this project. Here's what I was talking about fitting things in. This transformer, I want to get it as far away from the circuit card as possible, because the transformer is a source of noise, and it can be picked up by the transformer for the balanced output on the circuit card. So we want to keep those things as far apart as we can. Also, the orientation of these things matters. We really don't have a choice anymore which way we can orient this transformer, because it's already on the circuit card and designed. But this transformer I can put this way, or I can put it this way, or I can even angle it if I need. So I'll show you how we decide how to orient that in the next video. But for now, let's just say that we're going to put the transformer over here in the corner like this. This circuit card will go roughly about here, and rather than using those big 40 microfarad caps and having to make room for them under here on the circuit card for the rectifier, I had a multi-cap can. You'll see these in Champs and many other amplifiers. This one has 3 caps in it, all at 500 volt. It has a 40 microfarad, 20 microfarad, and 20 microfarad. So I can use that 40, and I can also use the two 20s in parallel to make a 40 microfarad capacitor. Capacitors in parallel, their capacitance adds. So I can get 240 microfarads out of this, or I could go first into the 40 microfarad, dropping resistor, 20 microfarad, and another dropping resistor and 20 microfarad. That will make the voltage, the DC voltage, even smoother, so even further reducing hum from the DC supply line. Also, it will allow me to drop that voltage down. As I said, 350 volts is still pretty high technically for the 12AX7. So I may make one more change to the power supply and go 40 microfarad, 20 microfarad, 20 microfarad with dropping resistors between both. Maybe not even may, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that. But the main point of that is this now doesn't take up so much territory. It will sit right over here in this general area. So basically the top of the chassis, once it's built, because the circuit card will be inside, will essentially look like this. That's that part of the plan. It's all coming together very well now. I'm very happy with how it's coming together. The other thing is to drill the holes in the chassis. So this is kind of a bit of an unboxing. So I used to use, I had knockout punches. Basically, they're like a big kind of paper hole punch. You have a piece that goes underneath the metal you want to make the hole in, and it has a hole in the middle, and then you have another piece that punches through that and punches the circle out to make it simple. I, like I say, used to use those. They have been lost years ago, and I didn't really like the way they worked. I used them on my Jagsters. So I ordered a set of cheap step bits. They are supposedly titanium, and hopefully they will do the job. So I've got 5 different step bits. I can go from 3/16 of an inch all the way up to 1 3/8 inch holes. So I'm going to try, oh, look at this. Anyway, I'm going to try those for drilling all the holes for everything I need to put in the chassis. That's coming up in another video. Interesting, this also included a spring-loaded punch. That's nice, that'll be useful. So don't want to put a hole in my desk, so I'm not going to test it right now. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Like always, links to my band, One Soul Thrust, are in the description below. Please check us out. And until the next video, we'll see you.